This is the Planeteers Podcast. Stories of women who are doing the work, restoring what's broken, protecting what still holds, and showing us that change is still possible. I'm Beth Bannerman. Each week, I talk with scientists, leaders, and doers, women who are shaping the future with courage, creativity, and grit. The damage is real. So is their courage to heal it.
So today, our listeners have a real treat. This is a really exciting time for Iron Butterfly Media because we are launching our third podcast. Woo! We have our fourth host for a new podcast that we're going to share with you. We're going to do a drum roll and let her announce it a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But we want to get to know this fabulous woman that is now a part of the Iron Butterfly Media team, but also is a new host of one of Iron Butterfly Media's podcasts. And so today we're welcoming Beth Bannerman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Exciting times. So I know we're all excited. I'll let Katie say a few things and Sarah say a few things, and then we're just going to dive in.
Yeah, Beth, we are so excited to have you. I know I speak for everyone on the team when I say that you bring just a totally new perspective, a new background, set of skills, geographic influence. So Beth is located on the West Coast. And as we'll kind of dig into a little bit more, you don't come from the intelligence community, the military, or the national security space, which
don't call me for anything that you might need in those areas. That would not be a good idea.
Yes. And I think that to us is a strength. We've had many people say, like, you guys should really focus on what you're good at, right? Which is intelligence and national security and the military. And we say we disagree. And that there's room for women's stories everywhere. And we're excited to dig in a little bit today on how this really is like amplifying our narrative and reinforcing our narrative and our mission in ways that we find really exciting.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, I'm so excited too. I feel like the most amazing things are born out of different groups and industries that collaborate that you wouldn't expect. And so I think this is a really cool example of leaders in different industries coming together to make something beautiful that you may not necessarily have envisioned before ever collaborating.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. I look up to both of you guys. Like the podcasts that you have already launched are, I've got big shoes to fill is what I'm trying to say. But I follow in your footsteps in kind of telling genuine and authentic stories about women who are doing some really phenomenal work, and the stories are worth telling. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks.
Well, we're excited to have you. So before we learn all about what we're planning and what this podcast is going to be and the fabulous topic that you've chosen to launch into, we want to know about you. Iron Butterfly Media is all about elevating women's voices, and you are a fascinating person. And we're so excited to have our listeners learn more about you and your listeners learn more about you. So let's start from the beginning like we normally do at Iron Butterfly. And let's tell us about kind of where you grew up and kind of what brought you to where you are right now and launching a podcast.
Yeah. So I guess it's important for me to say the name of the podcast is The Planeteers. And it's focused on nature and conservation. My love of nature really started as a young kid. I grew up in a very crowded house outside Philadelphia. There was 4 kids, 2 parents, a dog, 1 bathroom, no TV. And I was Gen X, right? I'm Gen X. So we spent a lot of time outdoors playing. And then there were the weekly library trips that really kind of sparked my love of story. Whether it was climbing trees or raking leaves and jumping in the leaf piles in the autumn, or catching fireflies, I was enamored with nature from the get-go, really. And I think my parents really instilled that in us. I mean, we just didn't have a lot of money. So our vacations were camping trips and trips to the Jersey Shore. And that was it. And I loved it. It was pure joy for me. It was only after college where I realized that my childhood neighborhood wasn't exactly what it seemed, which is, we watched men in hazmat suits come in and quarantine fences go up. And evidently there were toxic, poisonous chemicals in the earth and soil and the air for decades. Wow. Who knew? Who knew that people were getting sick in our neighborhood and there was a connection? And that was my first wake-up call, I think, to environmental impact and also environmental injustice. And we didn't have any money. Our parents were hardworking. They weren't, political advocates. They weren't wealthy with lawyers and things like that. We just kind of got on with it. I was always a curious kid, and then I had a career in local journalism for a while before I progressed into business communications, and then I found myself covering Enron, one of the the big energy companies that eventually collapsed because they were essentially publishing information around their energy trades that were bogus, that was false. You may remember that, and a lot of people lost a lot of their life savings that had investments in this company. So I saw pretty clearly how using false information and telling stories that weren't true could be really damaging to people. My career went on. I got into corporate communications. It took me around the world. I was leading big communications teams in Poland and the Netherlands and India and Singapore and the UK and the US. And there I learned that we have a lot more in common. It's such a cliche than we do that divides us. And, the earth and nature is something that everybody enjoys no matter where you are in the planet. And from a political standpoint, when you take a look at, how are we all connected and how does the earth connect us? You can see all the policies and, you can hear all the debates that are going on now. But actually, there's also that security aspect to it that kind of connects me to Iron Butterfly Media in a way, which is, when there are limited resources from a natural perspective, people move, right? They have to move to where the water is, or they have to move out of the way of extreme weather events. This causes insecurity and it impacts every aspect of society and the health of society. And so, all of that to say that I started to understand the interconnectedness that nature has with all of us in an everyday way that we don't even think about. That corporate communications role turned into a communications role, like full circle moment for a sustainable chemical company out in California where I am now. And they were using new biotechnology to create these chemicals that were not harming the planet. In fact, they were disrupting traditional supply chains by introducing healthy chemicals for consumer product goods. And I felt like, oh, this is great. Like, wow. I mean, imagine, from the beginning to now. And I was really, really enjoying that work. It took me to the UN to speak at the COP, the climate conference. It gave me the opportunity to partner with the BBC and create some nature positive films and just meet some dynamic people, men and women, who are doing some really interesting things, CEOs to scientists, artists to activists in this space. And I just thought there's plenty of stories to talk about here. And I think, and then in 2023, I went on a safari with my husband. This is a bucket list thing, right? Went to Botswana and a few other countries, and being out, it was a photography expedition, and there were some women that were leading it. And being out in the wilderness with like actual lions, you have to appreciate, from my background, where I come from, like going to the Philadelphia Zoo was like a big deal, right? And so here I am, like finally in this part of my life where I'm so fortunate to be on a safari, and I'm really, really like kind of taking in all of this nature from early morning sunrise to sunset. And there was something that kind of clicked with me that said, I've got to bring this back. I've got to tell people what I see. I've got to share this. People need to know. Anybody who isn't fortunate enough to be out there and to actually really kind of breathe it in and really kind of get a sense of just how everything is so still and everything, and nature just kind of moves on its own clock. It was pretty transformative for me. And then serendipity kind of brought me to you. We started chatting about kind of how things are connected, and that you are kind of expanding your butterfly wings with new stories and new sectors. And I was like, please sign me up. I was like super excited to join you guys.
That's amazing. I also love your story about being on the safari. Like, I think the first thing that popped in my head is we all have those moments in our life where you know that like something big is happening. Like, you don't know what it is, but you're like, this is a really important moment. And I love the idea of that moment leading you to Iron Butterfly.
Katie, there were so many times out there. It's like, there was one time where I looked up at the moon, and the moon was in the shape of like, okay, I'm not an astrologist, but like it was like a smiley face, kind of a crescent, right? And I don't see moons like that. Not from when I was in Philly, not from when I was living in the UK, not in California. It's always left or right. It's never like this shape, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is so cool and so different. And this is like magical, this is like, we're all connected. Just, we have completely different viewpoints, but it's like, we all see issues and problems from different perspectives. Wouldn't it be great if we started to share those stories,
Yeah.
and create a community,
Totally. So I think this is a perfect segue. So tell us about maybe the moment or series of moments for you when you realized you really wanted to start a podcast, start cataloging these stories, and kind of like take us through the origin story of the Planeteers.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I am as you know, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of storytelling, from being a little kid and like going to the library and getting to pick out our 3 to 5 books each week, right? And then fast forward all the way through my career, we were telling stories using different channels, whether it was digital or in person, et cetera. But it really came down to really the story of people and the story of humanity. Who's the person behind the activity? Who's the person behind the challenge? And how do they face adversity? What can I learn from that? How can I get inspired from that? So that has been an enduring theme throughout my entire career. I've always loved it. Last year, I took a few courses in screenwriting, and I wrote a screenplay, and it has a nature theme to it. So I'm constantly kind of developing my skill set, I guess, in the ways we can reach and connect with each other and tell stories in a way that actually brings light and life. And as I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about this safari experience and my whole life, and how do I bring all these parts of myself together? I've always been a big fan of Disney, and they have this this team called the Imagineers at Disney that come up and imagine all these great things like theme parks and new technology, and in my kind of screenwriting studies, I also was fortunate enough to attend a few conferences, and one where I saw some folks from Disney put on a kind of presentation of what's next, with robotics and holograms and things like that. And I thought, they are really breaking barriers in terms of storytelling and connecting. And I thought, well, I could do that with nature stories, and I could call it Planeteers, and it could be a blog, and then I thought, well, actually that feels flat, and there's so many blogs, like it could be a podcast, and I thought, well, I've always loved listening, and I love podcasts, and pretty much podcasts are so easy right now to create with technology. They're so accessible that I thought, well, I should just give it a go. I should just try it out and see if people want to listen.
Amazing. I love that. Sarah, it sounds kind of similar to your origin story.
I know. When you said serendipity, I was laughing to myself. One, that's one of my favorite words ever. And two, it was exactly how I felt when I met Megan and Katie, because I had this call to do something creative, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. And then we met, and I learned about what they were doing. And it was just this serendipitous moment of, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And just having the stars align with the right people, because that's the most important part, was just so special.
I think what's really cool with all of our stories and how we all ended up kind of together is that, we believed in stories, and but also, and maybe more importantly, we believe in women and we believe in collaboration. And I think we all found each other because of those reasons, right? And whether we were introduced by someone or we worked together, or there's, whatever that serendipitous moment was, we ended up together because we kind of believe in the same things, right? And so here we are, and it's kind of pretty amazing that now we have another, member and fabulous host starting something new that's going to bring something new and important to the world. So congratulations, Beth. It's really cool.
Thanks. I mean, I think our voice is our greatest power. The challenge is that it's pretty noisy in the world right now, and there's a lot of voices. But I think you're right about just the way we found each other. I think having a podcast and having a communication and opening up for people to, for people to listen and to engage with us, those ripple effects, you never know what will happen as a result. Like maybe there's somebody who's developing something that's new, or they're thinking about a new career, and there's something that one of the guests says
That's
that
right.
changes the way they think about things. And it's like, you just can't predict it. We're not on a golf course together, like an old man's club.
Yeah,
This is the new way of connecting, and women have
that's
always
right.
been amazing at connecting, so this is like really,
And
that's what excites me, is the possibility of it. Right.
and that's so true when you say that women have always been like connectors, but they've always, if you really think about it, they've always been storytellers too, right? Like they were the glue of their families, whatever that looked like, right, throughout time. And so they were relaying those stories to their whatever stories they had to their children. And so it's I don't know. I never thought about it that way, but it's another cool way to think about it.
And Beth, why do you think that right now is the time to launch the Planeteers? Like, where is the need that you see? And particularly, there's so much changing in the world right now. Like,
Yeah.
what void do you see this filling?
Well, I think this is an opportunity to create a shared space where people can come together who are like-hearted, as well as like-minded. I don't think it matters who you voted for. This is an opportunity to come together on issues that actually are exciting about the future. There's none of us that aren't impacted by the news about extreme weather events, fires in LA, or the floods and the terrible weather in North Carolina, or on and on and on. Right? There is no place that is untouched by extreme weather. And our reliance on natural resources in our own neighborhood is real. Like it is really real. So this is my what I don't want, and I think it's probably important to mention, is that this is not going to be a doom and gloom. There's a burning platform. The earth is burning. We're above the 1.5 Celsius degree mark. Climate change is here. Like, yes, and let's get to know some of the people who are actually doing some really cool stuff about it, who are creating a cooler kind of world. And I think that is that for me is the void that I don't see anybody. I haven't seen anybody else fill yet. And I think if more people, uh, replicate what we're doing here, awesome. Like the more, the better, the more, the merrier. I think there's plenty of stories to tell, and I think we all could use it, not as a distraction, by the way, to what's going on in the world, or to be happy, clappy, and Pollyanna about things, but actually to kind of balance out a little bit the truth of what's going on. There's a lot of really hard work, and people are head down, purpose driven, getting stuff done. They're not necessarily waving their arms and trying to get a lot of recognition. And I just think it's important for us to shine a light on those types of people, because they're really decent, good people that are really working hard.
I think we could all three of us, Katie and Sarah and I, could say that one of the things we've learned from doing our two podcasts is that every person, but in particular, because we all focus on women, every woman is extraordinary and ordinary at the same time, right? And I'm not going to take credit for that. One of our guests had said it once. And I think that's what's so wonderful about these types of storytelling podcasts and what you're doing is you'll show the extraordinary work that these ordinary people do, right?
Yeah.
And that's really exciting.
I mean, I've listened to your podcast, and there was one that comes to mind just now. Sarah, it was one of your episodes. You had interviewed an Air Force pilot, and I was struck by her story. And I thought, what a great opportunity that you have, that I have, that we have as ordinary women talking to these extraordinary people, like extraordinary women. So I am 100% on board with like this ordinary, extraordinary thing that's happening. But yeah, I mean, just the women and what they do and their stories on how they get it done is just really unbelievable.
Absolutely. I also love what you said about it not just being doom and gloom. Like, as you know, at Iron Butterfly, one of the things that makes us unique is our values. And those are authenticity, belief, and love. And, authenticity, we want everyone to show up completely 100% as themselves, like unsanded edges and all. Love, we always want to create just like a really loving space. Like we want every event, episode, like anything that we touch for people to be able to feel the love. And I think the one that's most important right now is belief. And if everything is doom and gloom, there's no belief, right? Because you are just pessimistic, you feel hopeless, and we like leech ourselves of our power when we see the world that way, because we have to believe that no matter what is happening, like we are agents and we're agents of change, and like we all own space that like we can do something with. So I love that you said that, because like that's the root of the idea of the butterfly effect, is like all of us believe that like we can make a change no matter how small. And like the ripple effects, like you said, like they can grow over time. But like it really is that belief. I think that is like the thread that runs through all of our podcasts and media projects. They're all very different, but I think they all share that in common.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you can share with all of us, including not just the audience, but all of us here, like what can we expect? Like what are we going to hear? Like what are we going to see? What are we going to feel when you launch in the coming months?
It's top secret.
Touche.
It's so top secret. I don't even know. No, to be honest, a lot of options on the table. This is a brand new podcast, talking to a number of people, but so far the women that I have planned for our first season are kind of run the gamut from CEO to scientist, like I said, from activist to artist. So you may hear from a filmmaker who is working on nature positive films. You may hear from a fundraiser who has spent decades at Conservation International, one of the biggest kind of NGOs in the world in terms of trying to raise funds and where do those funds go and how do those funds get in the hands of maybe indigenous peoples that are actually on the ground that need the help. Really kind of money flow conversations about how do we actually get stuff done. So yeah, there will be, all options are on the table. There's going to be a variety. I hope to have it really diverse, but honestly, like if there are some ideas or some certain areas that folks really want to hear about, like I'm all ears. Let's build this podcast together.
Amazing.
Awesome.
So I have an interesting question, and I'm actually kind of curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this. So one of the questions, so Beth, we've obviously already started talking about your podcast with a select few. We haven't publicly announced it, but we've talked about it with some people. And some of the reactions that we get are interesting. Like some people will say, well, oh, the green space, that seems like completely out of left field and like totally unrelated to what you all have done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, like, why did you, as someone creating a podcast about women in the green space, decide to partner with Iron Butterfly, which kind of has its roots in the intelligence and national security community? And I'm curious also from Megan and Sarah, like, what are some of the parallels or overlap that you see? And like, why does this pairing make sense to all of us here?
Well, I mean, I think uh, aside from subject matter, it really comes down to a sense of trust and integrity. So I really believe in you and the work that you have done and your approach. Your core values align with mine. Your energy, your positivity, your can-do-it spirit, all of that kind of stuff is like, that is, you can't teach that. That either exists or it does not exist. And when I find that, I like to kind of like really connect with those people. And I know something good will come of it, some type of collaborative work that will impact someone else for a benefit will come of it. So it really starts with a chemistry, a connection with the people that you work with, like your core team. And then beyond that, I think there are logical connections between our security, economic prosperity, and also immigration when it comes to, and the safety or lack of safety with immigration when it comes to natural resources or the lack thereof. So when you start to take people's water away, or you dam a river, or there is a drought, or there is a horrible earthquake or a tsunami, et cetera, all countries come together to assist in that space. And the people that are impacted really rely on people's generosity to help. And there will be people who are victims of that, who are taken advantage of by folks who actually use those situations for their financial gain or for to gain more power. And so I do think there is a connection philosophically, but it really, for me, really started on a personal connection.
Sarah, you go next.
I have so many thoughts on this because I've even been asked that question with intelligence and military, which are a little bit more complementary, but they're not the same thing. And my answer would be that all of the women or guests that we're going to bring into the fold of this are going to be service driven and have that at the core of their being. Like they see something that, they believe in, or a change that they want to make, and they're going to go after it in whatever way that they can. And so I think that service is kind of the string that unites all of our different industries and really connects us. But I think the really special and important thing too is that we can learn so much from each other. Like I get so inspired by listening to leaders in different industries and spaces because they may have a framework that they see the world in that I've never considered, or it may be really similar to what I'm currently dealing with. And it's just really cool to see it from another person's lens. And I think when we bring different groups together, like Beth already said, we realize we're so much more similar than we realize. And it's so cool to have conversations like that across industry because we all have our, prejudice of like what people do and how certain industries work, but it's cool to have those meaningful connections. And then most certainly, I mean, the community that we've built and just the culture at Iron Butterfly Media is the most fundamental thing that just drives everything that we do, and bringing the right people into that circle and just seeing beautiful things that are made out of it.
Man, I shouldn't have gone last. Both of those were so good. I mean, fundamentally, I will just say that, talking about sustainability and the green space is a national security issue. So if you want a connection, there it is. I think that people don't understand and don't know, and no fault of their own. It's not discussed, or nor should they know that, in the intelligence community, this is a topic that people do work on this. For the reasons, Beth, you said, if people are moving away from different coasts because of hurricanes and rising waters, if they're moving countries because of because of weather related things or drought or no access to water. And they're moving to different countries. That's a national security issue. And that is something you have to discuss and think about and talk about and understand. So, there is a connection. That doesn't mean, though, that was why we decided to do this, that there was these connections. I think Katie and I always hoped, even though our foundation is the national security space, our core values are bigger than just our space, and they're in every space. They're in every community, and so we always hoped we'd grow out of just our community, which was the national security community. And so it just so happens that we can do it in an incremental way, because there is a connection here, right? But this is something that it's growth for us as well. So
yeah,
I love that question, Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think about so Sue Gordon, our friend, mentor, champion, who many of our listeners know. She was the principal deputy director of national intelligence, which is basically the second most senior woman in the intelligence community. She actually started as a zoology major. That was her major in college. And we've talked to her about this so many times. And every time I talk to her about it, it totally transforms the way that I think about the world, which is at first I asked her oh, Sue, what's your favorite animal? And she was like, no. You think that I like zoology because I like animals, but I like zoology because it's the study of systems and how systems work or how systems don't work. And it's actually kind of her wisdom that this metaphor of the butterfly effect was born out of. And I think as humans, we have this tendency to think of ourselves as separate from the earth. We are somehow a separate system, but these systems are very much related. They're very much interconnected. And so I think it will, if nothing else, intelligence aside, national security aside, I think this will help me think differently about the world and my connection to the world. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all here to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting. The terminology systems is so important, and I'm so glad you raised it. So if you think about kind of native peoples, they lived in harmony with the earth, right? They had a whole system of a sustainable system of living with the seasons and with the region of the world that they were living in. There was fishing communities, and then there was harvesting communities, et cetera. And over time, we really have the relationship with humanity and the planet has changed for a number of people, not for everyone, but so much so that the earth is here to serve us. What can we get out of the earth? How do we use the earth? And I'm really encouraged by a lot of the new way of thinking. There is enormous progression going on, by the way, in regenerative agriculture, for example, which I'm just learning about, which is fantastic. Over time, metals have tainted our soil. So this is from runoff and all kinds of things over the years, right? And it's made growing crops more difficult. So there are these new regenerative agriculture companies, teams, organizations, investors actually of getting involved in really progressing some of that technology so that these systems of agriculture are really self-sustaining and are more harmonious with, rainfall and sunlight and things like that. So they're not kind of forcing a man-made system onto the earth. Instead, they're paying attention to how does the earth, and then how do you really build that up? And it's happening with sustainable fishing spaces as well. So there's been places that are kind of tourist hotspots, down in the bottom of the Baja Peninsula, where the local community, they wanted to, they thought fishing was going to be the driver of their economy, and it took a lot of work with people in that region to convince them that if they created a sustainable fishing area and then quarantined off a whole area just for tourism, just to watch the fish, not to kill the fish, that actually they proved over time with research that the population got bigger and healthier, the fish got more vibrant, more diverse. And so actually it brought in more, the fishing was not impacted, and the economy for tourism grew. So, but you have got to like do this over time. So there is this system mentality that I think people recognize. And I would love to do more stories on that. I think that's really, really, very, very cool.
Well, that's a good kind of segue into our next question which is, what are your like hopes and dreams? What are your hopes and dreams for this podcast or even beyond? I mean, I kind of like thinking about beyond too, but what's, what are you manifesting? That's a better question.
Well, I'm going through this like phase right now. So I just lost my mother, by the way. So my mom was a really important person in my life, and she was she was instrumental in connecting me with nature and like helping me, showing me how to make sand drip castles and at the beach and all kinds of fun things. And so I'm having this like existential phase right now in my life where I'm thinking about what are my dreams, And honestly, I also feel a little bit of powerless around life. It's like, well, I couldn't control my mom leaving. There's so much things in life I can't control. What I can control is having really good conversations with really good people and hope that that ripple impacts somebody else. So right now, I'm like kind of sticking to my knitting. I'm like, let me just do some really great stories and let me hope that they will have an impact. So build a community, a caring, kind community, people doing cool things, and then let go of the rest. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
I love that.
Me too.
I love that. You just got to do the work, one foot in front of the other. So, Beth, do you have any questions for us?
I sure do. So,
I
mentioned. It's kind of an obvious one. And I mentioned it earlier on in my points that I was making around. Look, I'm not gonna avoid politics, but there's so many different channels of people where they can get their political news. I am not that person. Just like I should not be on the front line with a gun. I should not be a spy. You don't want me in those roles. Like, also, I'm not a political pundit, right? But like me, the topic that I'm talking about is influenced by policy change in the U.S. And by the way, it's impacted by some of the changes that are happening in the EU right now as well. But how are you thinking about the future, and how do you look at 2025 just in particular in light of the political background, and why are you kind of, and I know you are, bullish around let's keep telling these great stories despite a lot of the volatility and noise that's around us politically?
Who wants to take that one first?
That's a tough one, right?
I liked what you said, Beth, about, in moments where we feel out of control, like finding the things that we can control. And I think right now for my community, specifically with the women in the arena, we've seen communities quite literally like canceled. People being told you can no longer gather, you can no longer mentor, you can no longer have this space that you've relied on. And to that I say, well, we will continue doing what we're doing, and we will control what we can control, which is to continue having meaningful conversations and like create a space where people's stories are told and we build meaningful connections. And I want to just continue to drive that in a time where people, I think, feel like they don't have a lot of resources to lean on and they don't know who to look to. And I want to amplify the voices of women who will continue to speak bravely, even though right now it's a difficult time to do that. And just really amplify who those women are to the people who really need to hear it. And I also want to set the example of doing that with grace and doing that with love, because it's so easy right now to get angry and emotional. And God knows I've done that quite a bit in the last few weeks. But when I think about the leaders who I look up to the most, who have made the most change in times like this, they always led with grace, and they always led with humility, and they were always a source of calm in a time where things were chaotic. And so I hope to continue to do that.
Wow, that's great.
I think similarly, Megan, I'm sure you'll have some things to add to this, but when we talk about intelligence, really, when sometimes people think of intelligence, they think of like James Bond or like people that are out in the field. Intelligence at the end of the day is the study of the world. That's what it is, right? And so I think sometimes we describe what Iron Butterfly Podcast is as like documenting history, because we're documenting stories of women, right? And I think right now there's a history unfolding. And I think now more than ever, it's important to capture those stories. And I think also similarly, like what we've seen recently is a lot of kind of shifts towards conformity and like away from diversity and authenticity. And I think what we honestly stand for is the fact that everyone's story is worth honoring, is worth sharing, is worth celebrating. Like we talked about systems earlier, right? And I think all of us know what it feels like to exist within a system that wasn't quite built for us, or that requires us to shift to fit neatly into these kind of like organizational boxes, right? And I think what our mission is to continue telling stories and offer a space where people can be their complete authentic self without sanding their edges, right? Where they can actually just really exist just as they are and tell their story just as they are. And those things we don't see changing. If anything, we see it being more important than ever.
The only thing, I would say those two things, and because those are two perfect answers, and I fully agree with both of them, both Sarah and Katie. And I would say one of the many reasons, because there wasn't just one, for the reason why we started Iron Butterfly Podcast in particular, but ultimately media, was that we wanted our audience, whoever that is, to have a better understanding that we're closer together than we are farther apart, right? And so when you hear the stories of these women, whatever your preconceived notions were, whether they were a government worker, or they were a woman, they were in intelligence, they were a military officer, whatever those assumptions were about them, when you hear the story and you learn about someone, it brings you closer to them, right? And you understand that they are like you, they are like your mom, they're like your neighbors, they're like your friends, the people that you went to school with. And so it's, I think, more important than ever to create those relationships, even if those are just through stories, to create the understanding of other people. And two women that we have had on the podcast who are Iron Butterflies have said, and one of them just said it recently, that sharing stories helps us understand our own stories better. And I can't, like, it's just so wild saying that out loud, because even today, thinking about my story and Katie and I discussing our own stories, it allowed us to understand where other people are, right? And then, or vice versa. And so I think that's why it's important, for all of the reasons we all three said.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's true. We do learn from other people, and we kind of find ourselves, our own story in others. Like I referred to that Air Force pilot on Sarah's podcast, and she was talking. She was the one that was on the mission for the Osama bin Laden mission. And one of the things that she said was she prioritizes in life as much as she does as a pilot. I'm going to completely botch this up, but she said something to the effect of, there are near rocks and far rocks. And I don't know how many times I have like quoted her in conversations with friends who are stressing about one thing or the other. And I'm like, well, you've got your near rocks and your far rocks.
I love
it's
that.
like it's such a helpful, little tidbit that I would never have gotten had I not heard her story. And that has helped me, and I have used it to help others. So it's just this really cool. But I guess another question that I have for you is, what have you loved about the podcast work that you've done so far? What is something that frustrates you?
Who wants
Oh my
to go
gosh.
first?
I'll go.
Yeah,
So
we'll go in reverse.
yeah, I'll go. So I think what I love about it is, I just love stories. I love listening to people. I think everyone, I know I said this earlier, is everyone comes on the podcast and thinks they don't have an interesting story. And each story is more fascinating than the next, right? And it's just, it's a beautiful thing for someone to share like their story with you, and they trust you with their story. And, each time we gain, I feel like we gain a sister or we gain a friend every time we have a new person on. What frustrates me about it, I think it's just, it's there's not a lot that frustrates us. I think it's all like, the business side of it, or it's the like, we got to make sure that we get all, like we want to make sure it looks great and it's posted nicely. And that, like the silly stuff. But it's really, it's fun. Like, I don't think there's a whole lot that we get that we don't like about what we're doing. It's been a blessing, really.
Well, I will offer that I hate the sound of my own voice. So I can't believe that I'm doing this. Like, I hate that about doing a podcast. I will
you don't have to listen to yourself. You don't have to. You should, because you should really listen to each episode. But like, you don't technically have to. You don't have to. That's hilarious.
I think my answer is somewhat similar to Megan. When you asked what frustrates me, it doesn't connect to the rest of my answer at all. But the first thing that popped in my mind was taxes. I literally hate taxes. It's like there's something about it that just feels like I'm just going to go to jail for 50 years, even though I'm trying to do everything I can to file them correctly. So that's what frustrates me more than anything. But I think like what I love is kind of similar to what Megan said. I think, in our community, in intelligence in particular, but I think this is true of many women, it's the first time they've ever told their story. And there's something just so special about watching someone like own their history and like own their present and their future. And you watch them knit it together, like in real time, and like you see sparks fly. And there is just something like, I will never get tired of that, of just like watching that, like a beautiful tapestry, like kind of, be created over the course of a 45-minute interview, And 100%. It's even cool, like sometimes the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves change, from moment to moment. And so even like some of the women that we've, had the pleasure of interviewing multiple times, the way they tell their story the first time might be different than the way they tell their story the second time. But there's like so much power in just like owning your story and owning your space. And it just feels very like purposeful and beautiful. So that's what I love most.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'll start with, well, I agree with everything that you guys both said. And I'll add that I love the networks that are created out of the podcast. Like, I love that I'll have people listen to someone's episode and then they'll like see them at an event and say, oh, I know that we have this common thing because I heard you talk about this. And I've quite literally seen networks be born out of that. And it's just so cool. It's almost like we all have this little superpower. We're like, oh, we're part of this community. We all know each other. And I'm so excited to just see that continue to grow. And I mean, I absolutely love just the feeling of, making someone feel like their story adds value to the world, and just seeing that connect, that, they have meaningful insights and that their story is special and unique. And I just love meeting people and learning from people that I might have never met. They might have been a passing face on LinkedIn, or I might have seen them, at an event and not said hi, but to get to connect with them in such a honestly vulnerable, really real way is just so cool and so special. And then for what I don't like, and I think that the trends here are that we're all in this for the right reasons, because we like the business stuff and the money stuff, but we love like the storytelling. So that just shows that we're all here because we love storytelling and we love each other, but we don't want to do the big girl stuff, I guess.
It's so funny. I can't believe Katie said that answer too, because normally that's my answer. I'm like, I hate accounting and taxes.
Taxes so much that when I did my taxes this year, I thought of her because I've heard her say it so many times. I was like, Katie hates taxes. Like, she would hate this right now. I'm about to go meet my accountant.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
wow.
I've heard
Put that on my tombstone.
Yeah.
Hate taxes, love stories.
Lover of people, hater of taxes.
Yes. I would be proud. I would be proud to rest in peace with that on my tombstone.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Amazing. Well, Beth, we are so excited to have you as part of the team. We cannot wait to launch the Planeteers in March of this year. And we're just so lucky to have you on the team. We're lucky to have your perspective. We're lucky to be expanding our community in this way. I love Sarah's answer about like watching communities be created. And these are communities that normally don't overlap. And I'm really excited to see just the communities that are built and forged, and the stories that you're able to share with the world. We're just really, really excited to have you.
Yeah, well, me too, guys. Like, I'm really, really excited. I do want to circle back on that money point. Are you saying we're not going to be making tons of money then? Is that
TBD?
Yeah.
TBD.
in the
Don't
future?
count on it though.
That's not why we're here. That's not why we're here, Beth. Right. Okay.
But if you want to support a women-owned small business, like, share, and subscribe.
And that's a perfect way to say,
yes.
Listen, stay tuned. We are going to be shouting from the rooftops. You're going to hear all about Beth's podcast on all our social media channels. You're going to learn how to get involved with her. You're going to learn where to find her, her website, and all the things. So stay tuned. In the next month, you will hear from us. You will hear from her. And more importantly, you will hear her first episode.
Thanks, guys. Absolute honor to be with you. Thank you so very much. Such a privilege. Truly.
Same here. Okay, stay fierce.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Planeteers Podcast. If it meant something to you, send it to someone who'd care, or leave a review to help others find us. You can find us on Insta, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky, or at planeteerspodcast.com. Join us next time with more women creating a cooler world.